Am I live? I'm live. Hello. Hi, I am Lise Colucci, and I am one of the life coaches at queenbeing.com, where we help you to discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse in toxic relationships. And welcome to today's live stream. I'm going to talk about a topic today that may be triggering and is sensitive. So I've put it in the title so you know what's going on before you enter the room. So today we want to talk about the abuse of vulnerability, sexuality as it pertains to narcissistic abuse and BDSM. There is a high number of people that I have spoken to and of survivors that I have spoken to, been around, whatever, that expressed the abuse they felt with coercion in a sexual sense when it came to, how should I word this, non-traditional sexual practices. So we're talking about a narcissistic person who most likely is a very sadistic narcissistic person. Many of them are highly sadistic because they don't have empathy, actually get a thrill off of other people's pain and suffering. Entering into a very vulnerable and very trust-based sexual practice that requires trust on both sides. It requires communication. It requires intimacy that goes beyond a lot of what intimacy can go to when you're not participating in this type of lifestyle. So this is not against the lifestyle or the practices or the choices that people make. This is to point out that when you are entering into a relationship with someone who is interested in a BDSM type of situation, you know, a kink situation, that you be very, very, very careful who you choose and who you allow into your life in that regard, because this is a playground for narcissists. This is a place where it keeps buffering, James. Is it working now? I don't know. I think it's on your end because mine looks like it's fine. Okay. Anyway, this is a place where many, many, many women in particular have told me they have been seduced and coerced into doing things they don't want to do. And the problem is, it doesn't start off like, hey, you want me to tie you up? You know, sometimes it does, but it generally starts off with grooming, like all narcissistic abuse does, grooming you into pushing your boundaries further and further. And now, while that can be a measure of sexual expression or intimacy expression, to push your boundaries with someone you trust, you can't trust a narcissist in any regard. And what they'll do is convince you that it's something you want to do because what you're doing is trying to please them. And you may actually enjoy this as well, and it's fine. But the point is that they push the boundaries to the point where you are saying yes to something that you feel inside you should be saying no to. And this is what I hear over and over again. Like, he got me to let him tie me up. He got me to let him start, you know, hitting me with a whip or whatever. You know, he got me to, and it was, I didn't really want to do it, but I said, okay. And I heard myself saying, okay, even though inside I didn't want to do it. And this is, hi, Violet and James. This is not, how it should work. Okay. It should never be a coercion kind of situation. And if you ever feel coerced in this regard, there's something wrong. It should be a mutually understood agreement between people when they enter into something like this. It does require, like I said, a lot of trust and a lot of understanding and having respect for other people's boundaries. So the problem with talking about this is I tried to contact people within the community, within the you know, at large, the BDSM community, as I did when I talked about the non-monogamy and polyamory. And with that community, I was able to get a response. And with the BDSM kink community, no one would talk to me. So this is all my own opinion. This is all based on what I've experienced and what I have seen and what I have talked to with other survivors. And this is not a judgment against people within a community. However, being that no one would speak to me, it's very difficult to get another perspective on this. So we're going to go with what I am talking about as my own opinion. And that's the way it goes. Hello, Denise and Violet and James. So the problem where do I want to start here? If what people say to me is that they feel they had their trust and their vulnerabilities violated in a situation where they were bound and basically held captive. You see what I'm saying? At their own agreement to do so, because they were, they said yes to something that in reality was a coercion. If you know anything about narcissistic abuse, which pretty much everyone here will, and you know anything about gaslighting and manipulation and projection and the way they coerce, there is, in my opinion, no agreement that is not coercion when you're talking about narcissistic abuse and sex of any kind, and especially sex that pushes the boundaries and the limits, because the narcissist uses sex to gain power. They use it to manipulate, and the main thing they use it for is to have a hold on you. So they understand that people bond through sex, and they bond through sex. They just don't bond with the heart. They bond with ownership. Okay, so if they feel that they own you in that regard, and they feel that they possess you, then you are theirs to do what they wish with. And for a sadistic narcissist, this particular topic of kink and BDSM is a place where many people, and like I said, women in particular, have had basically been violated because they've been, am I making sense? Like they say yes to something that they later feel they shouldn't have said yes to because it was really a pushing of a boundary. And when they're in that position, what can happen is you feel yourself detach and dissociate, and you lay there and you let it happen, and you say nothing because you love this person and you want the relationship to work out, and you think that you're involved in something that is intimate and fun, or whatever your feeling is about it. But the way the narcissist twists it and uses it is to gain power and control over you, and to humiliate and hurt you. So when you're people will be in newer relationships, and this will come up. And this is the part where I feel like we need to talk about it, because there's a lot of buffering going on too for you. Really weird. I don't know why. If it's my end, it's not buffering. It's not doing anything. I wonder if it's YouTube in particular, because I don't see it. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Maybe I'll keep it short and then come back if anyone's interested in hearing more about this. So we can come back and talk about it tomorrow. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just keep it short. So I don't want to talk a whole long time about this. I just want to make people aware that when they are out there, hi Shastina, out there and meeting people in particular, or if they are involved in a situation where they have this going on and they feel like they're with a narcissistic person, to make sure they understand that they are being, that this is part of the abuse, and it is a very manipulative, very dangerous area to be in, because it releases control when you're in a relationship where there is a dominant partner and a submissive partner of any kind in role play or in fun. That trust level has to be so high, and you have to have an equal understanding of who you are as individuals and human beings. And one person cannot be a narcissist and the other, the other basically being used, right? So what are you guys saying? I don't think I groove with this topic, at least not the way Lisa's presenting it. That's okay. You don't have to, because you probably haven't experienced it the way I'm presenting it. The topic itself, the act itself, the whatever, is not the problem. The problem is when you have a narcissistic person involved, and it's very, very hard in the beginning to understand, to know the difference. And going into the relationships like this, you have to be really careful that you know who it is you're dealing with. I guess that's my point. You have to understand, this is a place where if this is your thing, you better be really careful who you let into your life, because this is where people will, it's a fast manipulation and it's a fast power play. And the dynamic of power happens at a higher level than when you don't have this going on. And I feel like too many women have come to me saying that this has happened, and they feel ashamed and they feel betrayed and even raped. Okay. And even consensually, so to speak, but you can't have consent when you have manipulation. That's my point. So if you're not grooving with it, you probably haven't experienced it at this, this way. I could see how it could be very dangerous. It is very, very dangerous. And I mean, no one's in here who probably has had this happen because no one's chatting about it, but this is, it's very dangerous, and it's, and the problem is it's really popular, right? It's a popular thing right now, or it has been over the past 10 years or so. It's a popular thing to be open about and to be, and to, that's why I don't date exactly. It is a very vulnerable state. I do have some experience, but I fell into it because of toxic abuse, including, I fell into it because of toxic abuse, including narcissistic. I don't understand that, what you're saying. It's not the act, like I'm saying, it's not, the act isn't the problem. It's the level of control a narcissist holds over you, even with one experience with them in this regard, because they use it to groom you fast, and you're offering up consent to someone who is going to push your boundaries beyond the level that you're comfortable with every time, because that's the whole point. The sadistic person they're not in it for, I mean, part of the fun and the play is pushing boundaries to the edge, right? I mean, that would be the whole point, right? Otherwise, why have that kind of tension within a dynamic of a relationship? But when someone pushes your boundaries beyond where you're comfortable, that's when it becomes toxic, and a sadist will do that, and they enjoy it. So, yeah, I don't understand what Jack Lumen is saying either. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep it short and brief today. So if anyone has anything else they want to talk about, feel free. I'll probably be here about 10 more minutes. We're just going to be quick today. A quickie. All right. So, you know, any sexual experience with a narcissist is toxic. We know this. They'd use all of your vulnerabilities within that regard. I mean, it's a place where people open and bond, right? It's a place where people put their trust and their emotions and connect with another human being, right? We don't do that with just everyone, most of us. And serious trust would be needed. And see, that's the problem, Violet. Serious trust is needed, but they gain your trust through the grooming process fast. Think about how a narcissist gains your trust just to get into your life. And now imagine it like tenfold. And that's what it's like. They gain your trust. They learn your vulnerabilities or your fears. And they'll play to those fears in a playful way within that context of what BDSM encompasses. And then they will start pushing it to the point where you are no longer consenting to it. You're completely either dissociated or in tears, and they're enjoying it. Yeah. So, okay. I did speak on this topic when Angie brought it up privately in Span. I don't remember. I can't remember all the topics. I'm sorry. I don't remember. I only know what's going on right this second. Sometimes, Jack Lumen. Tough subject to comment since it's so open publicly. It is a tough subject to talk about too. And I think it's important to talk about it. And that's why I'm trying to open up conversation about it. And I'm going to keep it brief, and I'll probably do more on it. What I will probably do is take this and add to it with more information and stories and make a video and compile it together, because there's a lot of people out there going through this who are in the middle of it, who are experiencing it right now, who have nowhere to go with it because of the shame that comes around with it, right? I mean, obviously it would create all kinds of emotions for a survivor. If you're with a narcissist and you're, just imagine the trauma bonds and the way that feels, and add on top of it being, in a sense, held captive in a sexual way, okay, and agreeing to it. And so there's all kinds of stuff wrapped up in it that comes back to the self that is important to talk about and understand that this is still manipulation. It's still not your fault. There's no reason to feel shame for yourself for saying yes to someone who is supposedly your partner, right? But people do. So it's important to like heal that part and know what happened so that you don't step into that again, because it's not the act or the practice of kink that's the problem. It's the toxic people who could be involved, and having a toxic person involved that's the problem. I keep those types of comments to my trauma therapist, but I do appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and try to reduce the shame. Yeah, and that's why, like, I understand people not wanting to comment and keeping it private, because obviously you're in a chat room that's public. However, if you ever want to, you know, send me info, or if you have anything privately, feel free to message me, and I can keep things confidential. If you want to share anything with other people and keep it confidential, I'm happy to pass along information with anonymously to anybody. I totally understand what you're saying, Lise. In the beginning, I was open to some new things, but later I set the boundaries when I felt uncomfortable. My boundaries were then crossed purposely. Yes, and if you don't, they'll often threaten to leave you. If you don't, they'll push it to the point where you're involved in something you didn't really mean to be involved in. And then if you don't continue with it, the narcissistic sadist will then say this is what they want, and then they'll threaten to leave you if you don't do what they say. So it becomes completely manipulative. They don't always threaten to leave you. They may hint at the fact that they need this in their life or else. And it's not that you enter into it always knowing that this is what it's going to be. It can slowly be built up and groomed into the relationship. So can we talk about dealing with the aftermath of shame? Yes. So the aftermath of shame can leave you what? It can leave you feeling like you can't trust yourself, right? It can leave you feeling like you let yourself get into a position that puts you in harm's way, or puts you in a position of feeling belittled and hurt, right? And not protecting yourself. I spent years blaming myself and feeling like I was a bad human for this type of abuse and toxic shame. Exactly. Because the way we consent to it feels like at the time a yes, but there's a piece of us inside saying no, because we feel the manipulation that happens. It's not between two healthy people. It's a toxic person having their way with you, just like all sex with a narcissist is. All of it is. It's all manipulation. So, I mean, that's the most binding part for a lot of people. That's the piece that's the hardest to let go of for a lot of people, because it actually physically binds you. I mean, it creates oxytocin in your bloodstream that you know, floods your body. I mean, in your brain, that floods your body with feelings of love. So yeah, and then the shame that comes from that, from allowing, and I mean that, don't mean that you actually allowed it. I mean, you participated in something that, this is one place your boundaries stayed firm. Good. Yeah. And excuse me. So the aftermath of shame would be forgiving yourself, right? It would be working to forgive yourself for the feelings and understanding what you believe about yourself because of what happened and because of what you experienced. So if you experience shame now, what are you believing about yourself? And if you're believing about yourself that you're a bad human being, then where can you go with your healing in order to change that belief? Because my belief is you're probably not a bad human being, right? It's that things like this create a programming that says you're a bad human being. So I would work with the belief system to try and change the shame maybe to guilt, and then the guilt maybe to forgiveness for yourself, right? Demanding to Skype and show breasts and then punished by ghosting and having an affair because you don't. Yep, stuff like that. Exactly. Let's see here. The narc would definitely push my boundaries and do things without consent. I stopped wanting to have sex with him. He shamed me for that, called me a prude, etc. Exactly. That's another point. Like, you see, it's not just this particular type of activity. It's all intimacy with the narcissist that is something. Yeah, that's something that we are consenting to and not at the same time. So hello to, is that Malta? And let's see, anyone else? Okay. All right. So I don't really have a whole lot else to go on with this today, because I just kind of wanted to open the dialogue in case people are out there and they feel alone and ashamed. They know they're not alone, and there's no need to be ashamed. This is part of the abuse that happens. And be careful when you are meeting new people. If this is your thing, I mean, it's nothing wrong with it in a healthy sense, right? But it's when you get the toxic people in there. And what a sadist will do, what a sadistic narcissist will do, is they need to and sexually derive pleasure from other people's pain. A lot of them, other people's pain, be it physical or emotional, and it's generally both mixed together. And if you've ever experienced that and witnessed that having from the other person, it is the most empty and terrifying and horrible combination, because you're sitting there feeling love for them and they're sitting there getting off on your pain. It's something that's really hard. I mean, if you've not experienced it, I'm so glad that you've not experienced it, and just watch the next video instead. You know what I'm saying? If you have experienced it, I feel ya, and I can only say that you forgive yourself for allowing yourself to be in that situation. You didn't put yourself in the situation on purpose. You were in what you felt was a loving relationship, and you're dealing with a sadistic monster, really. I think of that girl currently in the news who agreed to what she thought was BDSM relationship when she was 15, but starved and kept in a dog cage for a year. Oh my gosh. And then the charges against him dropped. Yikes. Since she had initially agreed to the relationship before he took everything too far past her boundaries, she supposedly doesn't have a case against her captor. That's an extreme example of exactly what I'm saying. And that's, it's an extreme example, because that, being locked up for a year doesn't necessarily part of it. But in a sense, that's what happens to your psyche when you are participating in things like this with a toxic narcissist who is sadistic in particular. So freaking sick. It really is. I think on the positive side, that though intimacy was rare, wasn't too bad, because he always went elsewhere later years of relationship, looking back on hindsight. So it wasn't because it wasn't with you. It was not so bad. That's one way to look at the cheating, that it saves you from the trauma bonding on that level. Doesn't save you entirely from it, but yeah. The poor girl has back issues that's awful. It is fake intimacy. But, and the part that gets me is the sadistic nature of it. When you are being vulnerable. So when a person is bound in any way, when a person is agreeing to when a person is agreeing to take the role of submission in a sexual sense, it opens you up to your own vulnerabilities. It's a fearful but also very open place when done the reason people do it, I believe, is because it can open them up to themselves in a way that is where they can experience their vulnerabilities in a safe space and have someone sort of acting out the role that they need to have encounter with what they're experiencing. Does that make sense? So that their vulnerabilities are laid out there and open, and they're experiencing this at the same time as it's a sexual experience. So it can be incredibly intimate and open and in a sense, a growth experience for some people. Okay. But when you add the narcissist and the sadistic narcissist to that mix, what you have is absolute abuse of power, 100% absolute abuse of power. And it can completely mess the person up who is been laying, in the position of vulnerability. And it can bind you in a trauma bond sense, because you're basically enacting the abuse cycle and adding the element of sex and consenting to it. The trauma bonds that happen in that space are incredible. And they're then, like, I forgot who was saying the shame that comes in. Was that Grace? The shame that comes in from having that happen, because it's like, maybe I'm not explaining it. I don't know. It's very difficult to live through and to experience and then to heal from. However, the power that comes from healing from it can be great, because once you see what it is and what happened, then you can reclaim those pieces of yourself for yourself. And part of it really is trying to find ways to let go of the shame, so that then you can move forward with, okay, well, now what do I need to learn? What vulnerabilities were out there, and how can I work with those, right? In a healthy way. Okay, fake news, fake food. Thank goodness we are waking up to these empty, abusive systems. Exactly. Okay. Relatable. They groom you through consent, which leaves you feeling it's your fault. There you go. That's a better way to put it than I did. They groom you through consent, which leaves you feeling like it's your fault. Yeah, it's sick. And there's nothing that you can say. There's nothing you can say in retrospect to them or to anyone else, really, to express how that is not your fault. And so, because it really is a system of consent. And, well, you said it was okay. But, there really is no safe word with a narcissist, not really, because they'll push boundaries in other ways. That what they'll do is they'll shut you down, or they'll withhold, or they'll, it's not, they'll do something to punish you for the fact that you said no to anything. So it's not good. They would try to strip you of what innocence is left in adulthood, and they slime you. That's right. That's right. That's what they do. Yep. And I mean, it really shows how they feed off of vulnerability, and they learn and abuse the places that we need to be held and treated with care, right? So breaking the trauma bond with distrusting our own boundaries after this is where I'm at with this. Oh, it's tricky. You see, it does. It adds a whole nother element to the trauma bonding, doesn't it? It's, I guess without knowing the difference, maybe I see a difference when people have had this experience. When they talk to me, I see a difference between the way that trauma bond is than compared with when this hasn't happened. So that's why I'm talking about it, because I think there's plenty of people out there who are going through this or are being groomed into it as we speak. So be careful. Not to, it can be done in a healthy way. Again, like I said, it's not the practice itself or the lifestyle itself. It's just, you really got to know who you're dealing with. And that would mean what? Going slow, taking it slow, understanding who you're dealing with, and, all the things, looking for the red flags. It takes a lot of time. Make you less than go against your values that you hold dear to show you are a bad person. Exactly. That there's a lot of shaming that they put into the play. There's a lot of, which, yes, is part of the deal. But when it's done by someone who is sadistic and narcissistic, they are deliberately shaming you in places where you almost can't heal from, well, you can, but you know what I mean? Like they're hitting you where you need to be supported rather than shamed. So I'm trying to contribute to the conversation, and that's twice now you've assumed. Who, me? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, James, you're talking to James. Okay. Yes, they abuse the boundaries. We need them to nurture and respect. Exactly. And not, yeah. And it's hard to talk about because and I understand that a lot of people who participate in this do enjoy this, and that's fine. And so it takes something that is once pleasurable or once, there's a psychological play and there's a psychosexual play that happens in dynamics like this that can be very powerful and can be very relationship building, within a healthy sense. So it takes that and it completely abuses it, and it completely distorts it in your own, for the person who's the survivor. Okay. All right. It seems like it should happen without mutual agreement, and it seems it should happen without a mutual agreement and discussion first, if it's healthy. Well, and that's the thing, is oftentimes a covert narcissist who is highly sadistic will have a lot of conversation about it. There'll be a lot of discussion. There'll be a lot of agreement. I mean, that's why it is so confusing. It's not until it can be sometimes not until you're fully immersed in it that you see the sadism come out. And you see, it's like how you don't know that you're with a covert maybe for 2 or 3 years, and then suddenly there they are and the mask falls off. It's the same thing, but when the mask falls off in this sense, it's the pain that it causes and the level of dissociation and shame that it causes to the survivor is on a different level, So, no, I gotcha. It shouldn't happen without consent, and that's the thing, is that you are discussing it. You're in discussion. It feels like you're agreeing. It feels like you are participating in the agreement. Does that make sense? But so I guess the point is, until someone isn't a narcissist, be really careful with what you do. And that can take years. And that's the scary part, right? Yeah. I have a problem with masochism because of sexualized narcissistic abuse. Does that make sense? Oh, okay. I have a problem with masochism because of not out of I don't understand what you mean. For me, I am not shamed by any of my actions. Good. But when things started to unravel, he used the things we did against me. Yep. Slut, whore, dirty were often used when I was being verbally assaulted, hurtful. And there you go. That's the other side of it. It gives them something to hold over your head too, doesn't it? Even though they're the ones participating as well. So, and I'm none of those things. No, you are not any of those things. And any of the things that you did were done because, they're not bad things. It's the way that they use them and the way that they manipulate that is so toxic and so dangerous in these situations. I was told that consent must be much more highly structured in BDSM practice. But can you see, Jack Lemmon, that there is no such thing as consent when you're dealing with a manipulator? And you know how they groom, and you know how subtly a covert narcissist can convince you of what they want being the thing that you want too. It's almost like it's like being seduced into consent, and you don't even know it. That's what I'm talking about here, is that there is no such thing as consent when you're talking about manipulation. And so that's where I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to people within the community. How do people deal with this? Because I don't know how one could give consent unless they truly knew someone to be non-narcissistic and understood the level of empathy that person has, because a sadistic person with no empathy is a dangerous creature, right? even if it's only psychologically dangerous. It's terrible. So, okay. Sometimes it just happens without conversation first. Suddenly someone is strangling you when they think you're making love. Exactly. And that too. Sometimes they just start putting it in, and that they'll do that even with when you give consent. They'll start pushing the boundaries. They're not going to say, we're going to do this. Here's the menu for today. This is what we're going to do tonight. No, that's not how it works. It's, whatever they feel like doing once they've got you in the position. Please expand on that question. I want to make sure I understand. That's to Jack Lumen. I never understood how masochism is part of a loving relationship. I am really old-fashioned, apparently. I think for some people, Shastina, the psychological play of psychosexual type of relationships where you are delving into your vulnerabilities and you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable and open to someone in a level that is absolutely just like giving yourself over, can be empowering to some people if the dynamic and the relationship is healthy, because the other person is then experiencing their own whatever, the opposite thing, and together it makes one thing. Does that make sense? And then you step out of it and you go back into your life and you have healthy relating and you talk about it, and then people process usually through these experiences when they do it in a healthy way. They process their whatever's going on for them. So when it's unhealthy is when there's abuse and manipulation going on, and no one has a chance to be safe when they're vulnerable. Okay. All right. I guess that is all I want to talk about today. And we'll do something a little more uplifting tomorrow. How's that? Or Thursday, rather. Okay. Anything else? No. All right, you guys. You take care. The shame, the guilt, that's all stuff to work on with your own belief system now about yourself. And it's the same with a lot of us. Just for any intimacy with a narcissist, there is shame involved afterwards for what we let ourselves let. And I'm using the word let, but I don't mean that you let yourself. I mean what we feel we let ourselves be led into or participate in. It kind of is across the board for most people when they're dealing with sexual issues and narcissists. Personally, I thank you for addressing this topic. It is hard to comment or talk about publicly where I am in my own recovery, but I appreciate the dialogue and I'm thankful. I am thankful for you too. And like I said, you can always email me comments privately if you want me to talk about more. And like I said, I'll probably take bits of this and then try to make a more cohesive video about it. And it would be helpful to have comments from people because I have a limited experience of my own, and I can only speak from that. So, without your comments, I can't say much more. So anyway, good riddance. This is a tough combo. It is. I'm sorry. I know. I warned you guys though, right? I said this is not an easy one today. It needs to be talked about though. And I'd like to find a way to speak of it a little more cohesively. Like I said, that, I hope you have an enjoyable day too. I've heard it said that in a healthy BDSM relationship, the sub has all the power. There you go. Because they set the limits. A sadistic narc takes that trust and violates the other person instead. 100% exactly. I'm going to read that again because that is 100% exactly what I'm talking about here. Okay, I'm going to read that again before we end. Hello, Natasha. Marina says, I've heard it said that in a healthy BDSM relationship, the sub, has all the power because they set the limits. A sadistic narcissist takes that trust and violates the other person instead. Yes. And when they don't push the boundaries and they don't get their way, they withhold affection almost always, or they punish, or they cheat, right? So there you go. Okay, you guys. I'm going to have to go, and I will I'm glad you tuned in, and I realized this was a unique and difficult topic, and I hope that I brought a little light to it so it's not quite so heavy. Let's see. Like I said, anyone has a comment they want to send me privately about it, feel free to email Coach Lise, Lisec, @gmail.com, and I can take those comments and add them to something that I will compile for a video that, like I said, is more cohesive about this. And I wish you well. Thank you for joining me. I will talk to you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.